The entire cast knew something was wrong. The star of One Day at a Time couldn't stay awake during filming. She forgot her lines. She showed up hours late. Behind the scenes, she was living a nightmare, shooting cocaine, using heroin, and spiraling out of control. When producers finally fired her in 1980, nobody knew if she'd live or die. Today, we reveal what really happened during the meltdown that changed TV forever. It all started with Whitney Blake. Before she ever created a TV show, she lived a story that would inspire one. In the 1950s, she was a divorced mother raising 3 kids on her own. Back then, being a single mom wasn't common, and it definitely wasn't easy. One of those kids, by the way, was Meredith Baxter, who would go on to become a star in her own right on Family Ties. Whitney knew what it meant to struggle and push through. Years later, she and her husband, Alan Mannings, used that experience to create something new, something that would change television. One day at a time. But the path wasn't smooth. The first version of the show was called 3 to Get Ready. It had the same lead actress, Bonnie Franklin, but the setup was different. Instead of focusing on a mother and her kids at home, it was set in a hospital. Anne Romano was a nurse with just one daughter. Some pieces were already there, like the character of Schneider, played by Pat Harrington Jr., but the heart of the story wasn't right. CBS didn't like it. The pilot flopped. It didn't feel real, didn't feel like home. So they scrapped it and started over. That's when Norman Lear stepped in with a better idea. He knew what worked. He'd already proven it with All in the Family. This time, he ditched the hospital. He focused on the apartment, the mother, and her 2 daughters. He gave Anne Romano a second child, Barbara, played by a young Valerie Bertinelli. That gave the show more energy, more contrast. Barbara was calm and steady. Julie, played by Mackenzie Phillips, was rebellious and fiery. They clashed, they laughed, they loved each other. It felt real. It felt like family. Lear also changed Anne's best friend, recasting the role with Mary Louise Wilson, who brought a spark to the show. Slowly, all the right pieces came together. When One Day at a Time first aired in 1975, no one expected it to change TV, but it did. The show followed Anne Romano, a divorced mother raising 2 teenage daughters on her own. She wasn't rich. She wasn't perfect. She was real. And that's what made people watch. Back then, TV didn't talk much about divorce, teenage issues, or mental health. This show did. And it didn't just talk. It made people feel something. There were laughs, sure. But there were also moments that hit hard. A lot of that came from the fact that co-creator Whitney Blake had lived it. She was a single mom herself. She knew the struggles, and she poured that truth into the show. Audiences connected with Anne, Julie, Barbara, and Schneider, the oddball superintendent who became like family. They saw parts of their own lives in that little apartment in Indianapolis. The show ran for 9 seasons. That's 209 episodes of love, pain, laughter, and growth. And even when it ended in 1984, people didn't forget it. Then, decades later, it came back. In 2017, Netflix brought One Day at a Time to a new generation. This time, the story followed a Cuban-American family. The mother, Penelope, was a military veteran raising 2 kids on her own. She battled PTSD, dealt with immigration issues, and supported her daughter as she came out. It was still funny, still heartfelt, and still just as bold as the original. Viewers didn't just watch, they finished. In fact, around 73% of people who started the reboot watched the whole season. That's rare. Most Netflix shows don't even crack 50%. Some shows had millions of hours watched, but still got canceled because people didn't stick around. One Day at a Time proved that strong storytelling mattered more than big numbers. So, what made it work? It's simple: emotion. When a story makes people feel, it sticks. Scientists have studied this. They've found that emotional stories raise cortisol and oxytocin in the brain, hormones that help us care, focus, and connect. That's why people remember them. It's why they talk about them after. It's why they keep watching. This show didn't just tell stories. It pulled you in. It made you part of the world. That connection led to deeper engagement, more empathy, and a real bond with the characters. People didn't just see Penelope or Anne. They saw themselves, their friends, their families. Even the structure of the show helped keep people hooked. Every so often, characters would break the fourth wall. They'd speak directly to the audience. It was like a secret handshake, something that made the viewer feel seen. These little surprises kept the show fresh, especially in later seasons when most sitcoms start to feel tired. While other long-running shows lost viewers over time, One Day at a Time stayed strong. That's because it kept evolving. It found ways to grab attention without losing heart. Whether it was Anne in the 70s or Penelope in the 2000s and 10s, the core never changed. It was always about family, truth, and finding laughter even in hard times. The 2017 reboot of One Day at a Time wasn't just another sitcom. It was something deeper, something braver. It told real stories, and it didn't hold back. One of the most powerful stories was about Elena, a teenage girl figuring out her identity. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But when it came time to pick a boy to escort her to her quinceañera, she realized she didn't want to choose any of them. That quiet moment sparked something in her. Over time, she began to understand that she might like girls. The show didn't rush her. It let her journey unfold slowly, the way it often does in real life. What made this even more powerful was the setting: a Cuban-American family with strong roots, traditions, and religion. These weren't just side details. They played a big part in how Elena's coming out was received. Her mother, Penelope, struggled at first. She wanted to be supportive, but it took time. Her grandmother, Lydia, had to wrestle with her Catholic faith and her deep love for Elena. And then came the hardest part. Elena's father, Victor, couldn't accept it. He walked out of her quinceañera and left her heartbroken. That scene didn't just hurt Elena, it hit everyone watching. But the show didn't stop with just the coming out. It kept telling Elena's story. She found love with Sid, who is non-binary. We got to see how they navigated their relationship, learned about intimacy, and even shared their first sexual experience. Most shows barely scratch the surface when it comes to queer female characters. But One Day at a Time gave Elena the space and time to grow, and it did so with care, honesty, and warmth. While Elena was finding herself, her mother Penelope was fighting her own battles. She was a veteran, a single mom, and she had PTSD. The show showed everything: her therapy sessions, her struggles with medication, the way depression crept in when she thought she was okay. One episode showed what happened when she stopped taking her antidepressants without telling her doctor. Things got dark. She started having thoughts she didn't want to admit. She didn't want to die, but she didn't want to be here either. That moment was raw and real, and it made people stop and think. Penelope's mental health didn't just affect her, it affected her kids and her mother. Lydia didn't understand why her daughter was taking pills. In her mind, those were for crazy people. That kind of reaction is common in many Latinx families, where mental health is often pushed aside or misunderstood. But instead of pretending everything was fine, The show put those hard conversations front and center. And then there was Victor, Penelope's ex-husband and Elena's father. He had his own trauma from military service, but he handled it differently. He drank to cope. That choice broke their marriage. The show didn't judge him harshly. It just showed the damage that can happen when pain is buried instead of faced. It made clear that there's no quick fix for things like PTSD, anxiety, or depression. You don't just get better. You keep going. You do the work. And that message landed hard. The show also stepped into another storm: immigration. At a time when anti-immigrant talk was everywhere, One Day at a Time told the truth from the perspective of a Cuban-American family just trying to live their lives. This wasn't about politics, it was about people. Families like theirs were feeling real fear as new policies made it harder to become citizens. Wait times for naturalization got longer. Rules kept changing. And all the while, the rhetoric got nastier. Immigrants were being called threats, accused of poisoning the blood of the country. That kind of language didn't just stay on TV or in the news. It followed people home. The characters on the show faced those fears head-on. They talked about the uncertainty, the anxiety, the feeling of always looking over your shoulder, and they did it with humor, love, and strength. The show gave faces and names to people who were often talked about like statistics. It reminded viewers that behind every policy or speech, there are real families just trying to get by, build a future, and feel safe. Mackenzie Phillips was a young TV star when her real life started to fall apart. She played Julie Cooper on the hit show One Day at a Time, a series all about facing problems step by step. But behind the scenes, her problems were growing too fast to handle. By the third season, things were getting out of control. She was using cocaine, heroin, and alcohol heavily. She'd show up late to work, exhausted, and barely able to rehearse. The crew noticed, the cast noticed, everyone could see the difference. It was a painful twist. While her character was learning how to grow up and face life one day at a time, Mackenzie was living a much darker version of that story. Years later, she explained that her addiction was rooted in deep trauma. She didn't always remember what had happened to her, but the symptoms never left. Restlessness, anger, sleepless nights. And the drugs were her escape. At her worst, she was injecting cocaine every 10 minutes. There was no way she could keep working like that. In 1980, the producers finally made the call. They had warned her. They gave her time off. But she couldn't stop. So they fired her. She didn't see it coming. She later said she thought they were going to praise her. Instead, they let her go. That moment hit hard. She went into rehab, but recovery was slow and full of setbacks. Her manager had tried to help before. They had sent her to hospitals. She wasn't ready. When she finally joined her father, John Phillips, in treatment, her condition shocked even the doctors. She looked skeletal. Her skin was covered in acne from poor nutrition. She could barely walk. Meanwhile, the show had to go on. The writers needed to explain why Julie had vanished. They came up with a simple story. Julie had gotten married and moved away. Life moved forward on the show, but Mackenzie's absence left a mark. After rehab, she returned for a short guest role in 1981. The script brought Julie back home, upset about her cheating husband. It was a smart way to bring her back without ignoring everything that had happened. Her return to the set was filled with tension. She hadn't spoken to most of the cast in over a year. Only Valerie Bertinelli had reached out briefly before her wedding. But when Mackenzie showed up, looking healthier and more grounded, the cast welcomed her with hugs. Bonnie Franklin, who played her mom on the show, told her she was proud. Valerie said it felt like the old days again, like having her sister back. It was a warm moment, but it didn't last. In 1983, Mackenzie relapsed. She started missing cues. She fell asleep during rehearsals. When the producer asked her to take a drug test, she refused. That was it. She was fired again. This time, for good. Even though her time on the show ended badly, her story became something bigger. Back then, it was rare for TV shows to talk about addiction behind the scenes. No one knew what to do when a star spiraled like that. Mackenzie's breakdown forced people to start asking those questions. Over time, things changed. Today, many shows will let actors take time off to get treatment. They write the characters out temporarily, instead of just cutting them off. It's not perfect, but it's progress. Years later, Mackenzie talked openly about everything she went through. She said the shame around addiction was the real enemy, and that telling the truth helps others heal. She returned to the reboot of One Day at a Time in 2016, not as Julie, but as Pam, a counselor for veterans. It was a fitting choice. By then, Mackenzie had become a certified drug and alcohol counselor herself. She had gone to rehab 11 times, and now she helps others do the same at a recovery center in Los Angeles. She calls it recovering out loud. For her, silence never worked, but honesty might save someone else. Justina Machado didn't just play Penelope Alvarez in One Day at a Time. She became her. And nowhere was that more powerful than in the Season 2 episode, Hello, Penelope. At first, Penelope seems fine. She's upbeat, full of energy, and feeling like her life is finally back on track. So she makes a big decision. She stops taking her antidepressants, thinking she doesn't need them anymore. But the mood lift doesn't last. Things quickly take a turn. What starts as a good day slowly crumbles. Penelope can't get out of bed. She doesn't want to eat. She can't feel anything at all. The brightness fades, and she's left in a place that feels cold, empty, and hopeless. Justina Machado plays it all with a quiet intensity. No overacting, no dramatic flair. Just raw, still pain. The show even cuts the laugh track, letting the silence sink in as we watch her fall apart. There's one moment that really hits. Penelope, lying in bed, starts recording her thoughts, like her therapist told her to. Her voice is shaky. She says she feels like she's failing as a mom, failing her own mother. She wonders if her kids would be better off without her. It's gut-wrenching. Machado doesn't cry or shout. She just breaks quietly, in a way that feels real. That scene earned her a Performer of the Week award, and it's not hard to see why. But what happened on screen was only part of the story. Behind the scenes, Machado had just one shot to perform that 6-minute monologue in front of a live audience. She was terrified. Even with her theater background, she admitted she was nervous. The audience gave off this energy, intense, electric, and Machado had to walk a tightrope between staying in character and staying present with them. It wasn't just another shoot. It was something deeper. The episode's writer, Michelle Badillo, shared that the story came from real experiences with depression, something very personal for the writers. And it wasn't just Machado who felt it. Rita Moreno, who plays Penelope's mom, said the whole cast was emotionally wrecked by the end of filming. They could barely hold it together. Penelope's pain wasn't just acting. It was something they all carried through that day. When the episode aired, the response was overwhelming. Veterans, single parents, people struggling with mental health, all kinds of viewers reached out to Machado and the cast. They said, "You got it right." They said they felt seen. Machado remembered those messages. She said people thanked them for telling the truth, for showing what depression really looks like. Even mental health experts praised the episode. They said it showed the dangers of stopping medication too suddenly. But more than that, they appreciated how the show didn't blame Penelope. It didn't treat her struggle like a weakness. It showed depression as a real illness, not a personal failure. That meant something, especially for people in the Latinx community, where there's often stigma around mental health. The impact of that one episode stretched far. It won awards, sure, but more than that, it changed how people saw the show. It wasn't just a comedy anymore. It was something more honest, more human. Critics said the episode felt like a one-act play. No cheap laughs, no sitcom formulas. Justina Machado carried the whole thing, not with big speeches, but with tiny expressions. A look, a pause, a slump of the shoulders. It was all there. That role brought Machado award wins and nominations, but even more, it brought her respect. Some critics were angry she wasn't nominated for an Emmy. They said her performance was unforgettable. They weren't wrong, because once you watch Hello, Penelope, it stays with you. Not just because it's sad, but because it's real. On March 14, 2019, fans of One Day at a Time got terrible news. Netflix had decided to cancel the show after just 3 seasons. It didn't make sense to a lot of people. The second and third seasons had perfect scores on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics loved it. Viewers who watched it loved it. So why was it being cut? Netflix's chief content officer, Ted Sarandos, released a statement. He thanked Norman Lear, the show's legendary producer, and praised co-creators Gloria Calderon-Kellett and Mike Royce. He said the decision was hard. But then, he added something that made fans even more frustrated. He claimed that not enough people were watching the show. That made it sound like the show didn't deserve to be saved, even though its 3rd season had just come out 1 month before. It felt rushed, like Netflix didn't give the show a real chance. Only a few weeks earlier, in February, Gloria Calderon-Kellett had already warned fans. She said Netflix told her they loved the show, but needed more people to watch it. That was the first sign that the show might be in trouble. When the cancellation became official, fans didn't stay quiet. Almost immediately, Twitter lit up with people sharing their anger and heartbreak. Hashtags like SaveODAAT and One Day at a Time began trending around the world. People were upset, not just because a great show was ending, but because they felt something bigger was being taken away. Something that mattered. The show meant a lot to the Latinx community, and to anyone who wanted to see real stories about real families on screen. Big names joined the fight. Lin-Manuel Miranda jumped in and tweeted directly at NBC, suggesting they pick up the show. He said networks loved comedies with loyal fans, and One Day at a Time had exactly that. It wasn't just a few angry tweets. It became a movement. People kept pushing, and they kept hope alive. Then, 3 months later, something amazing happened. On June 27, 2019, Gloria Calderon-Kellett gave fans the update they were waiting for. The show had been saved. It would return on a new network, Pop TV. 13 new episodes were coming. It was a huge win. The fans had done what felt impossible. They brought a canceled show back to life. But while fans were celebrating, the people behind the scenes at Netflix were still talking. At a tech conference in Arizona that June, Netflix's VP of Content, Cindy Holland, gave a blunt explanation for why they canceled the show. She admitted it was a good show, but she said that Netflix looked at one thing above all: how many people watched and how much it cost. Her words made it clear. The show just wasn't worth it to them in terms of numbers. She even said they hoped the show would get a bigger audience, but it didn't. So they cut it. That kind of thinking upset a lot of people. One Day at a Time was more than just another sitcom. It had heart. It had meaning. And it represented voices that were too often ignored on TV. Holland's comments made people feel like Netflix didn't care about any of that. But behind the scenes, Sony Pictures Television wasn't ready to give up. The studio moved fast. They started searching for a new network right away. It wasn't easy. A contract with Netflix said the show couldn't move to another streaming service for 2 to 3 years. That blocked most of the obvious options. CBS All Access was interested, but the Netflix deal made that impossible. Sony had to look elsewhere. Only cable and broadcast networks were available. Still, they kept going. For more than 3 months, Sony pitched the show to different networks. Meanwhile, fans launched a movement online. The hashtag #SaveODAAT went viral. Even celebrities like Lin-Manuel Miranda joined in. The noise helped. Eventually, all the effort paid off. Sony made a deal with Pop TV, a smaller cable channel, and the show had a new home. It was a big moment. On June 27, 2019, Pop TV announced they would bring the show back for a 13-episode 4th season. It was the first time a show had ever moved from a streaming platform back to cable. Usually, it went the other way around. Shows like Arrested Development had been saved by streamers, but this was the reverse. It signaled something new in the TV world. Pop TV's president, Brad Schwartz, believed in the show. He liked how it talked about real issues: mental health, immigration, racism, gender identity. The show had a voice, and Pop wanted to be part of that. It joined their growing lineup of thoughtful comedies, right next to Schitt's Creek. The deal also included something special. After airing on Pop, the new season would also show on CBS, the original home of the 1975 version of One Day at a Time. Plus, Pop got the rights to air the first 3 seasons on cable, though Netflix kept the streaming rights. But moving the show from Netflix to Pop came with new challenges. The budget was smaller. That meant the team had to make some compromises. They also had to change the format. On Netflix, episodes could be any length. On Pop, they had to fit into a time slot with commercials. That meant shorter episodes. The release model changed too. Netflix had released all episodes at once. On Pop, it would be 1 per week. That changed how the writers told the story. They couldn't assume viewers would binge-watch anymore. Season 4 began airing on March 24, 2020. To get more viewers, Pop ran the first episode not just on their own network, but also on TV Land and Logo TV at the same time. It worked. TV Land's broadcast had 5 times more viewers than Pop's, so Pop kept airing episodes on TV Land moving forward. Then came the pandemic. COVID-19 shut down production just as the season was picking up steam. Only 6 episodes had been filmed. The rest were on hold. No one knew what would happen next. The show's creators didn't want to stop. They got creative. Showrunner Gloria Calderon-Kellett turned one of the unfinished scripts into an animated special. The cast recorded their lines from home. Animators in Canada brought the episode to life. It took 2 months to finish. The special aired on June 16, 2020. But the long break between episodes hurt the momentum. Later that year, in November, Pop TV pulled the plug. The rest of the season was canceled. Sony tried once more to find a new network, but on December 8, 2020, they confirmed the show was over. The animated episode, meant as a creative stopgap, ended up being the show's final goodbye. It wasn't the ending anyone had hoped for, but it proved one thing. One day at a time mattered, and the people who made it never stopped fighting for it.